Hi, this is Kanchi, and you're listening to Thus Spake Kanchi. So, there are a couple of interesting questions in this episode, and I would love to answer them. So, the first question is devotion a necessity in the spiritual path? That's a great question. Is devotion a necessity in the spiritual path? Devotion is necessary in every path. You know, if you want to be successful in anything you do, you have to be devoted to it. Without being devoted to that, it's very difficult to achieve anything. You know, suppose you want to write a book, you have to be devoted to the idea that you want to write the book. You have to find the time, you have to devote some time to write the book. You have to devote energy into writing the book. You have to devote your thoughts and your mind to write. You have to make time, you have to find the space in your life, and you have to be really passionate about something, and this is not possible without being devoted to it. So, devotion, I would say, is a prerequisite not just in the spiritual path but in anything you do in life. You have to be devoted to your husband, you have to be devoted to your wife. Devotion does not necessarily mean subservience. It doesn't mean being subservient. So, being devoted to your husband does not necessarily mean being subservient to your husband. Being devoted to your wife does not mean being subservient to your wife. It means giving everything you have, giving your best to that relationship, you know, making the time, making the effort, and giving it that kind of importance in your life so you can make it successful, make it harmonious. The point of devotion is harmony, is to stop the struggle. If there are any struggles in that relationship or in that act of learning or creating something new, I mean, there are bound to be anything new you want to create in your life. You want to build some architectural wonder, you want to build a big house or a big bungalow, an amphitheater, a temple, whatever it is. It will have its challenges, it will come with its challenges, so you have to be devoted to make it happen. Without that, it's not possible. And in the spiritual path, it is as important, if not more important, in the spiritual path, because spiritual path is not like making instant coffee. Whereas you think to yourself, I am the self, I am God, Aham Brahmasmi, I am the universe, and then you attain the self, you become enlightened, and you become this powerful. Doesn't That's not how it necessarily works. It's a way of life, it's a way of living, it's a way of being. So it is a process, it is a long term process. It is living enlightenment, it is not just being enlightened. It is not just walking the path, but you become the path. It's not meditating on the self, but you become the self, you realize you are the self. So it takes a whole lot more than you know just being getting quick results or wanting quick results from it. Doesn't work like that. So it involves a great deal of hard work and dedication and devotion to the ideals. You have to be devoted to the idea of the self. You have to be devoted to the idea of the self. You have to really invest in it. Only then will you find the necessary strength, the necessary means to attain whatever it is that you have come here to attain. So, of course, it is absolutely necessary to be devoted to the ideals of knowledge. And that brings me to the next question. Is a guru necessary for enlightenment? Of course, a guru is necessary for enlightenment. Without a guru, there is no chance, there is no hope for enlightenment. But first, we have to understand what is Guru or who is a Guru. Any teacher who teaches you anything in your life, they're called acharyas. In Sanskrit, the root word acharya. Acharya does not mean guru. Acharya means teacher. The one who leads you to the path of enlightenment. The one who gives you diksha, spiritual initiation into enlightenment. He can be called a guru. And he can be called a guru only when he himself has attained the self. If he has not attained the self, it is like blind leading the blind. How can I give you something that I myself don't have? How can I give you enlightenment if I myself have no idea what enlightenment is? So it is blind leading the blind. So such an acharya is of no use to the spiritual path. Acharyas have a role to play in the realm of duality. They teach you things, you learn things from them. You could become a good scholar, a good mathematician, a good sports person, a good singer from your acharyas. But you can never attain the self with imperfect initiations. So the perfect initiation is necessary for attaining perfection. Where is this guru? How do you find this guru? In this day and age, where do you go around looking for a guru? How do you find such a guru who can give you enlightenment? Not just this age, in any age, the guru appears when the disciple is ready. When you are yourself ready for realization, the guru appears in any form whatsoever. It could be not necessarily in the human form, comes as inspiration. A guru can come as light, as God himself, as a deity, as a friend, as anything. Just a divine inspiration. It could be just a moment of clarity. A guru is not limited to the human body. So you don't necessarily have to meet a guru with 4 limbs and giving you spiritual initiation, diksha in Sanskrit, giving you a mantra. Not necessary. And the guru's real home is your own heart. Your own true self is the home for the guru. Your own true self is the guru. The indweller in you, the one who dwells in you, who dispels darkness, that shining self, that is the guru. So of course, without that guru pulling you inwards, there can be no realization. No matter how much people push you within from outside, no matter how the circumstances push you towards finding your own self, if there is no inward pull, if there is no deep desire for realization, if there is no deep passion and deep craving, deep desire, deep intention to realize your own self, a deep hunger for realization. Without this deep hunger, deep thirst for realization, for self-realization, you cannot attain the self. And this deep realization, this deep thirst, this deep hunger, that is called grace. It is grace of God, grace of the Guru. Without this grace, you will never feel the need for realization. You will never feel that desire to get enlightened. Only when something is pulling at your heartstrings with such force, then only will you say, I don't want the world, I am not associated with it. I want to find that which is permanent. I want to find that which can never leave me. So of course, the Guru is necessary for enlightenment. But we have to understand that Guru is not necessarily a human form. A Guru not necessarily comes in a human form. The whole universe is the Guru. The sun, the moon, the air you breathe, everything is the Guru. The people you meet, everything can be Gurus for you. You know what I mean? But the realization is given to you by the inner Guru, the one who pulls you within. There are many acharyas who come and give you, tell you paths, do this, do that. Because they are necessary, they do their bidding, but they cannot give you the ultimate. Then we have another question: what is karma and how to burn away karma? So, karma, is the fruits of your actions. It's not the actions themselves, it is the fruit of your actions. How you create, what you create. Suppose in a fit of anger, I hit somebody. That anger and that action that arose from that anger is my karma and the fruits of that anger. So, of course, it leads to a chain of events. That anger, that outburst of anger can create its own repercussions. It's just like how you throw a small pebble in the lake, and when the pebble hits the lake, there are ripples. The pebble sinks down and it's always there in the lake bed. In the same way, in your own deep consciousness, the samskaras or these actions and the seed of these actions remain, and they sprout, the fruits sprout, and you have to repay the debt of these karmas. So there might be a lot of things you might have done, and there comes a time, it's a cycle, it's a circle of life. Whatever you sow, you have to reap. So that is the universal truth. In all religions, they have this idea that you have to pay for your actions. You have to repay your debts to the world. You cannot just create something and expect that there will be no repayment. So it is very important. Whatever you throw out into the atmosphere comes back to you. Whatever vibration your frequency is, and that is the same kind of vibrations you attract. Suppose you're always full of anger and full of hatred, you're going to attract events and people that will generate more action, more anger and more hatred within you. And anger leads to more violence. So we know we know how the world operates. So violence begets violence, anger begets anger. So whatever you throw out in the world, you gain that back. So you keep building on the same things. So if you send out good vibrations, you send out vibrations of love and compassion and kindness, that is what you will receive. If you're grateful for your life, for the gift of life that you have, you're going to receive the same thing. You're going to receive things to be grateful for. You're going to have events in your life that you will be grateful for. If you're always complaining, you're always going to find yourself in situations where you will be complaining, and situations will arise in your life, which you can't do anything about rather than complain. So it is like how you build your own life. You know what I mean? So it's like there are three types of lines you can draw. There is a line you can draw on water. There is a line you can draw on the sand. And there is a line you draw, into a rock. The line on water disappears as easy as it came. And the line that you drew in a sand, it can be erased. It will be erased after a brief period of time. The line on the rock remains for a long time. So this is how we create our karmas. Something you do just out of the blue, just a small act. We all get angry, or we all get jealous, or we feel a tinge of love or attraction or whatever it is. And it is nothing. It comes and it goes. You let it go. You get angry, you get pissed off at somebody, whatever it is. It's just a tinge. So this is like a line on water. It disappears almost immediately. It leaves no trace. So this is not something that will come and bite you years later. And then there are things where you're not deeply attached to these ideas, but you are somewhat attached. And that is the line on the sand. These are the actions that these are the thought patterns or the actions that you repeat now and then. It is not a deep rooted pattern, but the deep rooted patterns are the lines in the rock. You carve out a line in the rock. This will not go years, no matter how many years, You have to be hit, you have to get hit by the rain for many, many years. Only then the line will disappear. So these kind of deep rooted desires, these kind of deep rooted actions, these kind of deep rooted patterns of thought, where you continuously go on hating on someone, hating on someone, hating on someone. These are the kind of things that have a massive, massive impression in your minds, and these are the things that shrink your consciousness. And these are the things that keep attracting the similar events, similar people, similar results in your life. So you might have wondered, why does the same thing keep happening to me over and over and over again? Why do I keep meeting the same people who betray me? For example, some people feel like, why do I keep meeting these toxic people in our lives? The toxicity is in them, no doubt, but you are attracting the toxicity because there is some toxicity within you, because you love this. Sometimes people love to be sad, people love to be depressed. That is their vibration. They like to play the victim card, that, oh my god, I'm such a good person, whatever it is. So we attract. As long as you keep playing the victim, you will always have people who will victimize you. So you have to find harmony with these ideas. You cannot just, keep creating these patterns that create and generate strong karma. And there is good karma, there is bad karma. In the path of realization, it is said that karma is like mountains and mountains and mountains. It's not a small thing. So you could take years and years and lifetimes after lifetimes to burn out this karma. It doesn't go away with just a thought or just an idea like, let's get rid of this karma. It could take forever. But you have to understand the real nature of this karma. Karma is deep rooted in illusion. It is deep rooted in Maya. So it's obviously there are, of course, mountains and mountains of karma, which you could take 100 lifetimes and you will not be able to erase it. You will not be able to do away with it. But these mountains of karma are made up of camphor. So you burn one place and the whole mountains burn out in a moment. And how do you burn out? How do you burn up this karma? Through self-knowledge, through the right knowledge of the self, not information about the self, not information about the world, but true deep knowledge of your own self, your own true nature. By knowing that which is real, all that which is unreal disappear. So this is the secret of karma. And the way to reverse it to a certain degree is to stop rewriting those lines, to stop carving out those lines in the rock. So you know yourselves, your habit patterns. So try to move away from that for now. Try to move away from shrinking your consciousness by repeating the same, affirmations of hatred and anger, and give up that hate you have against some people or some circumstances. Give up those attachments you have, and don't make those deep rooted, karmic bondage. Don't shrink your consciousness, come out of it. So then another question that I've been asked is, what happens after death? So this is a very deep question, and there are thousands of answers on this. But what is important is what is happening now. We will get to what happens after death. We will all find out eventually. If not today, tomorrow, someday we will find out what happens after death. One thing is real, that the fact is you are going to die. Person who is born, wherever there is birth, there is death. So there is no question about this. Birth and death are two sides of the same coin. Nobody escapes death. But what we are not taught is that whatever that dies must also be born in one form or the other. It's not necessarily in the same form. But there is no such thing as, death and the complete end of an entity. Whatever dies in nature, you will see, whatever dies is reborn. You know, whatever dies, you can do your own research scientifically. You will see that they always find another form. They are recycled into another form. So birth and death and birth. This is the reality. Whatever is born must die, and whatever dies will be born again. In Sanskrit, said Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam. Means you are born again and you die again. You are born again to die again. So this is the cycle of life and death, birth and death. So in the Vedic Dharma, people are not afraid of death. People are afraid of being born again. Because how do you put an end to this cycle? Where is the end for this? You're born, you suffer, you have diseases, and you have attachments, and you have, all these problems of related to the body, related to limitations. So they consider the body itself to be bondage, the body itself to be a disease. Because eventually, no matter how beautiful your body is, no matter how strong your body is, eventually it will lead to diseases and then death and pain. So the body is not something that is, considered very pure or considered something immortal. The body is always transient, and the body is the temple of pain, temple of misery. But the body also is the key. The mind and the body are also the key to realization. And realization is the only way you can escape this Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam. To escape this cycle of life and death. So it's not so important to see what happens after death. Let's ask ourselves what's happening right now. Do we know what is happening right now in this present moment? Do you know who you are? Do you know what your real nature is? Let's break the cycle of life and death. Let's break the cycle of creating karma and suffering for it. Let's break the cycle of impermanent relationships and attachments and desires and pain and suffering. Let's break the cycle of fear and anxiety. It is possible to break this fear of, death, this fear of losing things. It is possible to come out of anxiety. It is possible to come out of depression and sadness. It is very much possible to be happy. And happiness not in terms of excitement of getting something done, achieving something. That is not happiness. That is momentary. That is excitement. That is pleasure. The pleasure of success, the pleasure of winning, the pleasure of accomplishing things. You have to go beyond this concept of pleasure and pain. True happiness is your own nature. It is beyond, the ideas of pleasure and pain. In true happiness, there is no room for fear and anxiety. No room for attachment. No room for holding on to things. True happiness is a state of freedom, absolute freedom, where you're not bothered with the games your mind plays. In true happiness, there is no mind. You can say that there is no mind, even there is no mind, there is no world. There is no concept of God, there is no concept of right and wrong. It is beyond all concepts. So we don't know what happens after death. But in this present moment, can you find that happiness? Can you find that joy? Can you find that freedom? Can you find yourself? Which is the key? Look for yourself. Find your own self. Find the truth about your own self. Abide in your own self. Because your own self is of the nature of happiness. Your own self is freedom. Your own self is immortality. Your own self is eternal. Your own self is formless. Your own self is the truth. Your own self is God.